Before the headlines, before the funding, before the spotlight, there were builders. We mastered survival. We mastered hustle. But India's next chapter demands more. When resources were scarce, we built with ingenuity. When systems were missing, we built with trust. It demands systems. It demands standards. It demands scale. Not just businesses that run, but businesses that lead. This is the voice of India's builders. This is Beyond Jugaad.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Jugaad. This is the episode number 3. I'm Ajit Panicker, and in this podcast, we explore the realities of building and scaling businesses beyond survival mode, moving from the constant firefighting to building organizations that truly grow. Today's topic is something that almost every entrepreneur feels, but very few openly talk about. Is freedom just a myth for Indian entrepreneurs? Most entrepreneurs start their journey chasing freedom. Freedom to make decisions, freedom to create wealth, freedom to live life on their own terms. But somewhere along the way, many founders find themselves trapped inside the very business they created. The business depends on them for every decision. Vacations don't feel restful, growth increases pressure instead of reducing it, and slowly ownership starts feeling more like an obligation. So, what does true entrepreneurship freedom actually look like? And are we building businesses or simply creating highly stressful self employment for ourselves? So, to explore this, we usually have two wonderful guests. Sarika unfortunately couldn't join us for health reasons, but I have with me Samkit Shah, who's the founder and CEO of Aligned Pillars, who works closely with businesses on scaling, structure, leadership alignment, and building organizations that grow beyond founder dependency. So this is going to be a very honest and relatable conversation for entrepreneurs, founders, and business owners everywhere. So Samkit, let's get started. And I'm going to kick off straight up. It says, what kind of freedom are entrepreneurs actually chasing? Yeah, freedom hota kya? What is it that they're really chasing? What according to you, it is you being an entrepreneur, we're all entrepreneurs. So what does it, as a freedom mean to you?
So freedom, Ajit, I think we all, especially in the Indian context, we may be working somewhere for another company, or we may be, aspiring to have a business. But why do we want to have a business? अपने को किसी को report नहीं करना है. And I think that becomes the underlying assumption or the objective why we want to start our own business. So the first freedom, I think, as entrepreneurs, when they start a business, saying that I don't want to report to anybody, I want to do things my way. Going further, they also think that I don't want to be confined to a 9 to 5 job. कि मुझे किसी को permission लेनी है. If I need to go and go for a holiday, I need to check or fill in my application. They're saying, no, I want to be the master of my own time. So I can leave whenever I want. I can come whenever I want. And last is saying, okay, why should I just be restricting myself to that salary which I get? I want the freedom to really create that wealth, the disproportionate wealth which only they feel only a business can give. And I think these assumptions are, why I'm putting an assumption is because how much of it is true. Is it the truth or is it a myth? But these are the basic assumptions with which we all start with, saying ये freedom चाहिए, इसलिए धंधा करना है.
Yeah, what you're saying is, entrepreneurs are not there only chasing money. Most are chasing control over their lives too. The freedom to make decisions, create something meaningful, live life on their own terms. Make how much of a money that I think is that I want to make. But somewhere along this journey, many realize they have gained ownership but lost personal freedom. I mean,
Absolutely.
I have a lot of my friends who are entrepreneurs who started off this way, and they said that I'm consumed by my business and I lost my personal freedom. And that's always been the first question is actually, when did that entrepreneurship stop feeling like freedom? At what point is this flip happens, that you started off trying to make everything, available, and this whole free thing for you, and you realize that you just created a cage for yourself.
Absolutely.
When does that happen according to you?
We are using the word freedom, but seldom are entrepreneurs able to put that word कि मैं free हूँ कि नहीं. And I'll give you a very classic example. Last week, in my building where I stay, uh, that morning I had a very early morning meeting. So I was down by 8:30, and in a lift I met one of my neighbor, Gupta uncle. And I'm like, Gupta uncle, इतना जल्दी आप ऑफिस जा रहे हो? कि हाँ बेटा, 9 बजे तो ऑफिस पहुंचना है. I said, very good. And then we just split. Incidentally, that same night, 9:30 in the night, I was on my way back from tennis. And Gupta uncle is coming back from office. like, Gupta uncle, अब तक 9 बजे? हाँ बेटा, 9 से 9 ऑफिस में होना ही चाहिए. बेटा, पिछले 40 साल से मैंने सिर्फ 2 छुट्टियां ली है. एक दिन मैं बहुत ज्यादा बीमार था, और दूसरे दिन मेरे घर पे किसी का देहांत हो गया था. बाकी 40 साल में मैंने 2 छुट्टियां ली है. Now, when you ask Gupta uncle, is he really contemplating on freedom? No. For him, it's a golden shackle. कि भाई ऐसा ही होता है बिजनेस. अपने को 9 से 9 अगर नहीं गए तो बिजनेस नहीं है. And I think they embody that being busy and being in the office, first person in the morning and the last person in the evening, is my freedom. It is the way I operate, and that's my biggest pride in the 40 years. So I think that's where it starts, Ajit, that they don't realize, but it's a golden shackle.
Absolutely. This is, when that entrepreneur stops feeling like freedom, when everything is dependent on you, every decision, every crisis, every customer, every employee issue. And that's when the ownership turns into an obligation. Yeah, kahan phas gaya types, oh my God, why am I doing all these things? Yeah, mere bina to ye hoga hi nahi hai. And that's typically the kill factor of what you set to achieve. I wanted to be free. I needed to create. I needed to aspire to build something bigger. And this whole thing starts getting killed when it's all surrounded around you.
Correct.
And very few of us realize that we become a bottleneck to our own business. And it's my own personal experience. At the early stages when you're small, you end up doing everything yourself. And then as you keep growing, if you continue to do the same thing, you're the actual bottleneck to the growth. Now is the time when you need to just get out. You shouldn't be sitting out there. You should be letting someone else do a better job than you can. And of course, you run the organization, but you run it very, very differently from the early stages, And most of us don't tend to figure that out, especially in India, I've seen a lot of these international entrepreneurs, my friends who work abroad, or people who have come across entrepreneurship in other countries, especially the Western countries. I feel in India, entrepreneurs carry more than just business responsibility. Have you ever felt that before?
100%. See, I think as entrepreneurs, we spoke of this freedom, right? I'll give you an example. One of my friend, they say that, on a holiday, it's always me, my wife, and my son. We don't go out with any other family, any other couple. I said, why so? Like, actually, na kya hota hai, the entire holiday also, I have like multiple calls, and anyone who comes with us would get very irritated. And I think that's where that freedom he's not realizing, and it's a very large business. He does not need to be on the calls, but that's what he's opted for. That he wants to be absolutely stuck into the business because there is no structure. Now he thinks that he's carrying the responsibility of his family. He's carrying the responsibility of his of the employees. कि भाई इतने लोगों का घर मेरे कंपनी के ऊपर चल रहा है. And I think that kind of weighs down a lot on Indian entrepreneurs. Like you rightly said, it's not just about business transaction. कि भाई, I made it at X and I'm selling it at Y. That's very small part of the whole clog. They tend to approach their business with a much bigger weight, right from proving to the family, carrying on the legacy, even the social and the financial pressure कि भाई समाज में लोग क्या बोलेंगे, कितना पैसा कमा रहा है, ये बिजनेस कितना बड़ा हुआ इतने सालों में. And I think this constantly weighs down a lot of entrepreneurs as a social responsibility.
And I think it's very, very relevant to India because you suddenly have this guilt factor that you have inherited a business and you need to live up to it, the responsibility, the family stabilizer, you are the employer, you're the
Correct.
next generation bridge. All of these start playing on your mind, and then you suddenly start saying, oh, look at the invisible sacrifices the other
Yes.
families are doing, the siblings are doing. It's never ending. It's just never ending. The whole identity and the whole thing is just about your business, and that I have found that as a very big change in when it comes to Indian entrepreneurs. They just carry this weight along, and this
And
keeps.
that weight shows very clearly in the kind of pressure they operate with. Ki bhai, I have to keep the ball rolling, or else these invisible weights are going to weigh me down. Then they become less concerned about the bottom line and more concerned about, am I doing the right thing? Am I looking the right thing? Is my business growing in the right way where people can see that I'm growing? क्या मैंने और एक गाड़ी खरीदी है? क्या मैंने और एक घर खरीदा है? Nobody is going to come and check his business or his balance sheet, but people are going to see that, okay, इतने सालों में कितनी गाड़ी उसने ली है, इतने सालों में कितने हॉलीडेज उसने लिए हैं, अच्छा एक भी इंटरनेशनल हॉलीडे नहीं लिया अब तक, मतलब बिजनेस ठीक नहीं कर रहा होगा. How we equate in our Indian ecosystem all of these external factors which are the symbol of status compared to what actually the business supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
And it just intrigues me. I was talking to one very very large family, extremely down to earth. You meet the second third generation and they will show you the factory around, and at the end of the entire tour they will reveal that they are actually the family members. So simple. They all as a family only own a Honda City, nothing more than that. That's a family value. किसी को लेना है तो अपने आप घर से, from your own wealth you can take a Rolls Royce or whatever you want. But as a family you have to be very grounded. But look at the other entrepreneurs, probably companies smaller than them, have to do so much of the external show to prove to the world, to prove to the society that, yes, we have arrived. And that's a sorry
yeah,
plan, right?
yeah. And I guess it's just a very Indian context for it,
Very in
that
context.
it's very, so keeping that Indian context in mind, that comes to the very important thing. Sachme, can you switch off, or it's like it's a myth? No, I'm permanently on a call. You're running a business, I'm permanently on a call. And I tell you also, from a
Hmm.
lot of our customers, when you deal with, ओनर से बात करेगा,
Ah.
कितना भी बड़ा होने दो, ओनर से बात करेगा. एंड देन द एंटरप्रेन्योर सडनली फील्स द होल प्रेशर कि यार इतना पुराना कस्टमर है, मुझे तो बात करना ही पड़ेगा ना.
नहीं पड़ेगा.
मैं मतलब वो जो मैनेजर जो बिठाया हुआ है, उसको समझ में नहीं आएगा कि हमारा रिलेशनशिप क्या है, कैसा होता है.
Hmm.
वो
Hmm.
मेरा स्ट्रक्चर में बैठता नहीं है. सो व्हेन यू हैव दैट काइंड ऑफ एन अप्रोच, कैन यू रियली स्विच ऑफ, और आर वी परमानेंटली ऑन अ कॉल?
See, I believe the founder can switch off only when the business has someone switched on under him with clarity, authority, and accountability. Yes, we may have a lot of managers, we may have a lot of HODs, but how much clarity of the business direction have we given them? How much decisions have we empowered them to take it without being asked, to the promoters? Are they held accountable? The answer is no. Like you rightly said, Ajit, WhatsApp का रिप्लाई भी ग्रुप में ओनर ही करेगा, लेट नाइट कॉल्स भी वही लेगा, पेमेंट का एंजाइटी एंड कंटिन्यूस फॉलोअप also the owner himself will do. Then why would the HODs, why would the leaders, why would the managers really step up? They're saying ठीक है, साहब है ना, साहब का हमेशा switch चालू ही रहता है. So we are relaxed, and it tends to get into something I call as reverse delegation. एक कस्टमर का इश्यू आया, गो टू द फाउंडर्स केबिन, सर ये कस्टमर का इश्यू आया, फिनिश. एज अ मैनेजर माय जॉब इज ओवर. मैंने खो कर दिया ओनर्स को. अभी ओनर उठेगा, जाएगा, he will try to get the root cause, he will go and fix out the issues, he will go and reply to the customer. Manager is sitting and watching, he's a spectator. So this is a classic case which we call as reverse delegation. उल्टा होना चाहिए, but here the whole structure set by the founder is, no, I know my business very well, I know my customers very well, so I will tell you how to do it. And because of this attitude, they are constantly switched on, and they can never be switched off because the switch has never been passed to the next rung of leaders. And That's a big problem in my case. I see that you hired people at 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs packages, but they are just merely instruction takers. Every morning, 9:30, they enter your room. Okay, sir, आज क्या करना है? Have you really hired them for that purpose? Not really.
Yeah, and this whole switch on, switch off, is something that we really need to understand. And I want to share my own personal thing. Every year I do a Himalayan trek, right? And I choose the Himalayan trek only because I'm disconnected, completely
You're cut off.
disconnected, cut off. So even this year, I did the Annapurna Base Camp trek. It's a 14-day trek. Out of the 14 days, almost close to about 10 days, you're completely cut off.
Correct.
Your phones don't work, nothing happens. Now, what happens when you do this is two things you realize. One, when you come back, if everything has fallen apart, means you never built a good business.
Correct.
That's a fact. You never built a good business. That sense of reality. They say, no, प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करना है तो पहला प्रॉब्लम आइडेंटिफाई करो ना और फिर उसको एक्सेप्ट करो.
Correct.
उसके बाद प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करते हैं ना. So first identify the problem. So I realized that when I go for a trek and come back, if it hasn't fallen apart, that's a good sign, because then I should be figuring out what the hell am I doing for 8 hours in my office.
Exactly.
Right? And if there is something broken, it also tells you which are the gaps in the system which you can fix. And if, as an entrepreneur, if you have 8 hours at your disposal, you can do so much wonderful things, right? You never know, your creativity kicks in and you might start something more. Could be a backward integration, it could be a horizontal expansion. And very few of us realize that you have to force yourself to take that break. Get out of the system, and only then you realize. I mean, I've always been taught that you should make yourself indispensable. You're like how we said, just
very, very nicely put it, Ajit. So typically when I meet these promoters, founders, for the first meeting, they give me a very clear statement. Samkit bhai, we want to professionalize the organization. We want to create leaders. We want to create systems. I said, fantastic. Why do you want to do that? तो आप क्या करेंगे? My straight question is, तो फिर आप क्या करेंगे? And they're stunned, like, and they have no answer. I said, if you don't have that answer, that means you're never going to be switched off. You're going to be getting and working with them parallel, becoming a deterrent to them. You tell me, Samkit, I want to work, I want to play golf for 4 hours a day. That's an answer I will accept. But if you don't have a why do you want leaders under you? Why do you want systems to work for you? Because you want to be free. Why do you want to be free? And they don't have an answer. And like you rightly said, 8 hours, if I have to, dedicate to something, it has to be much different than what I was doing so far. Or else I'm just a football, between all my managers and trying to help them. But in that garb of helping, I'm actually micromanaging them. Iska kya hua? Uska kya hua?
And this is also the reason why most organizations are not able to build a second rank of people.
Yes.
People who don't get an opportunity to prove themselves, take their decisions. I mean, galtiyan to hone wala hai, but that's a cost of building an organization.
Absolutely.
The point is, ek baar galti ho gaya, you make sure your prevention, you prevent as much as possible, and you think through the whole process. Galti nahi hoga, phir bhi hoga, but that's the cost of actually building your organization. And that's it. Yeah. And I just want to take a little switch from this conversation, which is another side of this whole freedom for Indian entrepreneurs. Have you come across successful entrepreneurs who still feel financially trapped? Completely trapped in financials? Well, sab chal raha hai yaar, but very good. But then suddenly they realize that they are in a financial trap.
Yes.
What is the blind spot that we have seen? Have you seen number of people who have very successful, but they suddenly feel a problem here? Why is it that you think that happens?
I think, Ajit, if I go really hard on this, it's pure play ignorance. These entrepreneurs feel that apne ko dhanda aata hai, which means I know where to buy from, I know how to manufacture, and I know how to sell. So they feel that I'm a great entrepreneur. Well, that was good until you had X number of transactions. they never felt the need to really educate themselves financially. And you'll be surprised, Ajit. I have met entrepreneurs, they don't know the difference between a capital expenditure and an operating expenditure. They opened, this particular company opened a new showroom, and they incurred about good 18, 19 crores behind that showroom. And at the end of the year, when the accountant is showing them the books, like सर इस साल का अपना expense इतना हुआ, अरे वो 19 करोड़ अपने ऐड नहीं किया, वो भी खर्चा ही है ना अपना. It took almost 3 days for the accountant, and he failed to convince him कि सर ये सब बैलेंस शीट में जाएगा. It's one time capital expense. It is not going to be denting our profit for this year. अरे नहीं, देखो हाथ में पैसा कम है. They don't understand the difference between cash profit and actual P&L profit. And I think that's the reason for that is pure play ignorance. They have not vested themselves into understanding how to read a balance sheet, how to read a P&L, and take very, very informed decisions from there. And I think I've seen multiple entrepreneurs. The reason, most widely seen reason why they have not grown is because of their financial misinformation.
Yeah, in fact, many very rarely understand that a positive cash flow can be a loss to the business. In the
Yes.
P&L it might still be loss, but you have a positive cash flow. ये कैसा हो सकता है यार? Or you can have a negative cash flow and you can still be a profitable company.
Correct.
And the mistake happens when the positive cash flow is there and you decide that ये तो profit है, निकालो यार, property लेते हैं हम इससे.
Correct.
And it's typically we have seen a lot of the traditional businesses, like how we said, failing to understand these financial concepts and then ruining their business completely, just taking on building properties and not realizing that the company is going down. While actually the business is growing, the top line is growing.
And that's I was just going to refer to that problem statement. For them, finance means top line. Top line बढ़ रहा है, मतलब business बढ़िया है. But they don't understand how it is impacting their EBITDA, how it is impacting their PAT. Forget the concept of return on capital. That's an alien concept. फिर then I have to ask them कि भी अगर मैं पूरा आपका पैसा कंपनी से निकाल के मैं बैंक में डाल दूं तो कितना पैसा मिलेगा आपको? 8% मिलेगा, 7% मिलेगा. Are you generating more than that? नहीं, प्रॉफिट तो है ना संकित भाई, प्रॉफिट तो हो रहा है हर साल कंपनी में. But they don't understand the concept of return on capital employed, return on equity. And that's why I say it very, very bluntly, this is pure play ignorance at the part of the owners who choose only to look at the top line as a barometer and don't want to get into the balance sheet and the financial aspect of, are they really efficiently growing? Yes, they must be growing the top line, but are they efficiently growing? That's a big question.
This all comes to only one big question. Is the Jugaad culture quietly destroying entrepreneurial freedom? That is the topic that is, this is the typical Jugaad culture, right? This is just the typical Jugaad culture. And that's what is actually destroying the entrepreneurial freedom, because that's where you're scared. It's the dark, it's a dark lane. I don't know where I'm heading. I don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That stress is what is not letting you live a life. You get caged in it. Yeah, and there's something that I was told when I got into business. They said there's an employee, then there is something called a self-employed.
Yeah.
Right. So I said, what's the difference between the two? An employee is a guy who wants to build a career and works in an organization and he works on. Yeah. Self-employed is a guy who builds a company and becomes an employee of his company.
Of his own company. Correct.
Half of us get stuck there and don't realize that we have to run businesses. That's completely different from being self-employed. And I guess that's where this whole Jugaad approach comes in. So it all comes to only one big question. What does true entrepreneurial freedom actually look like? According to you, what is it all about?
So Ajit, I always believe, and this is something which I opened right at the start of any conversation, we all do 4 kind of things. Some things we are extremely bad at. मतलब we suck. कोई अपने को बोलेगा बैठ के PPT बनाओ, you will suck at it. Second is we are able. कुछ ठीक ठाक करके बना लेंगे. Third is I'm very superior at it. मतलब आप मुझे कुछ काम देंगे, मैं बढ़िया करूंगा. But if you ask me, Samkit, do you really want to do that? I would say no. That's where the fourth aspect comes is what's your distinct forte. As an entrepreneur, everyone has one distinct forte that you are fantastic, either in purchase or in manufacturing or in marketing. If I'm able to spend disproportionate time in what I am good at and delegate all the other things to more qualified managers, I think that's true freedom. Because as an entrepreneur, your job, like I asked in between, right? Why do you want to have leaders and systems? So they take care of your internal aspect, which means it leaves you with time to go out and explore opportunities. और कोई नहीं करने वाला है. If you're able to work on the opportunities, standing on the deck of the ship and not going down and saying maybe ek और पकड़ के even I will row it faster. No, the real freedom is you stand on the deck with the steering, ensuring that the ship is going towards the direction which we have envisioned. That is true freedom, in my opinion.
Amazing. That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah. And I guess, in this whole journey, having clarity in what your strength is, and when you put your professionals or you put other people, as an entrepreneur, you have one big responsibility. This is not palming off, like how what Samkit said, it's not palming off the responsibility or palming off the assignment, but the review of whether that assignment is being done very well or no still stops with you. So most of the people build systems, but fail to track the systems.
Yes.
And that reviewing a system is extremely important. You need to have control over it, and you need to make sure that you're constantly reviewing the systems. And that's been one of the things that I've learned it the hard way. You need to draw up systems, you need to mention, but you need to make sure that you're reviewing it and you're seeing whether that system is even relevant today. What you built 2 years ago may not be relevant in 2 years. And the only way to do that is through reviews. You need to keep reviewing and see whether that's working or it's not working. So my friends, seems like a very simple topic, but I think we can just go on talking about it. But this episode fundamentally challenges one assumption. Entrepreneurs start business seeking freedom, but often build structures that quietly remove it. So here's a deeper message. Jugaad creates survival. Systems create scale. And structure creates freedom. So real entrepreneurship freedom is not being constantly busy. It's not being needed everywhere or controlling everything. It's just simple clarity, delegation, replaceability, and the ability to step away without a collapse. That is truly kind of a freedom, which I think most entrepreneurs look for. You just cannot be, here is my personal belief. I would definitely love to be remembered as the guy who built a company and built a legacy. But I just don't want to be that guy who only knew how to build a company. I also want to there are other aspirations and the other things that I want to explore. Because if those things are also not achieved, I don't think I'll be a very happy man and build a great company. What do you think, Samkit?
For much more.
Yeah, you will keep craving for much more. You will there is a sense of incompleteness that you're going to feel, and that's going to kill you one day. Because at the end of the day, you and me have always spoken about it, right? Money is important, but that's just the yardstick to measure your success. It's not the true purpose of your business. It's not the true purpose of your life. And you should make lots and lots of it, no doubt of it, but it will always remain the yardstick. But the true quality of life is when you can build an organization, scale it up, and still have your freedom and enjoy it. So that's the core message that we thought we need to bring out in our episode number 3. We'll see you next month with another interesting topic on our episode number 4 on Beyond Jugaad. Thank you, Samkit. As usual, you share some of very great experiences from your consulting, and it's always fun chatting up with you.
Same here, Ajit. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, guys. See you next month.
Before the headlines, before the funding, before the spotlight, there were builders. We mastered survival. We mastered hustle. But India's next chapter demands more. When resources were scarce, we built with ingenuity. When systems were missing, we built with trust. It demands systems. It demands standards. It demands scale. Not just businesses that run, but businesses that lead. This is the voice of India's builders. This is Beyond Jugaad.